In these difficult times through which everyone is living at the moment, it's so nice to have a few precious minutes to enjoy a little bit of what life used to be like, and hopefully will be again shortly. And to that end, I'm delighted to say I've been given the opportunity to have a chat with a very good friend of mine and a wonderful author, Deborah Klée. Now, Deborah, you may recall, is the author of the acclaimed book, The Borrowed Boy, her fabulous debut novel. And if you haven't read The Borrowed Boy yet, please do. It's a wonderful read. Today, Deborah's joining me to talk about her new book, Just Bea. And you're going to tell us a little bit about the book, I think, Deborah, and then read us a short extract from it.
Yes, thank you, Ellie. So thank you very much, Ellie, for hosting this launch party. And thank you to all the readers, writers who have joined us. It's really nice to have your support. And hello, Willow, your
Sorry about
assistant, who we're very pleased to have with us as well. And will no doubt end up being the star of the show. Okay, I'll tell you about Just Bea. I would have liked to have shown you my author copy, but I've got a proof copy here, but the author copy will be here in time for me to be able to send a signed copy to the lucky winner of the giveaway at the end of our chat.
A beautiful, beautiful cover, I have to say.
I'm sorry the line goes across it, but I do love the snow globe, and I have to credit the wonderful Asia Blue design for her design. She did this one and she did The Borrowed Boy, and The Borrowed Boy won cover of the month as well for Chill Awards as well as the month. So
they are fabulous, fabulous covers. So
love working.
I'm very envious.
Okay, so I'm going to read the blurb first of all, and then I'm going to just read a short extract. Okay, so the blurb: sometimes you have to stop trying to be like everyone else and just be yourself. Bea Stevens and Ryan O'Malley are in danger of falling through the gaps of their own lives. The difference between them is Bea doesn't know it yet. When her world is shaken like a snow globe, Bea has to do what she does best: adapt. Homeless man Ryan is the key to unlocking the mystery of her friend Declan's disappearance, but can she trust Ryan enough to work for them to, can they trust one another enough to work together? As the pieces of her life settle in new and unexpected places, like the first fall of snow, Bea must make a choice. Does she try to salvage who she was or embrace who she might become? Just Bea takes the reader on a heartwarming journey from the glamour of a West End store to the harsh reality of life on the streets, and reminds us that home really is where the heart is. That's my blurb. I'm just going to turn my phone off, which just made a very rude noise. Sorry about that. And I'm just going to read a little extract from it. Okay, I'm just going to assistance here. Okay, so in this extract, I'm reading from Little Way In. I'm reading from chapter 3. Bea's had too much to drink at the floor manager's Christmas party, and she's feeling sorry for herself as she was passed over for promotion. So that morning on her way into work, she introduces herself to a homeless man, Ryan, as he was handing out flyers with information about a man that Bea once knew who'd gone missing. So now this is on her way home from having met him earlier that day. Bea stumbled out of King's Cross station and into the scene from a Christmas card. Powder soft snow, already a few inches thick, coated everything. A scattering of footprints was fast disappearing as more snow fell. She saw Ryan, the man with the flyers, straight away. He was helping an old woman create some shelter out of cardboard boxes. "You can't sleep out here," Bea slurred as she carefully planted one foot in front of the other, her feet sinking into the new snow. "Nobody should need to sleep in the street in this weather." "Careful!" Ryan reached out his hand to Bea as she jolted away. A heel skidded and she landed hard on her bottom. Cold, wet snow stung her calves and thighs. "I saw you going, but it was too late." What was he talking about? If he hadn't tried to grab hold of her, she wouldn't have fallen, and now she was sprawled, legs akimbo. Ryan bent over her as though she were the one in need of help. Oh, God, the humiliation. "It's okay," Bea said as she struggled up. "I told you it was snow boot weather." Ryan held up one of Bea's shoes and in his other hand the heel. Bea used the railings to hoist herself up. The sting of ice on her shoeless foot was unbearable. How long did it take to get frostbite? She'd get chilblains for sure. Bea slid back down the railings and landed on Ryan's sleeping bag. It's not fair. I work bloody hard. Nobody appreciates me. And now this. The old woman muttered something and then burrowed into her cardboard shelter. Life's shit, but you have to make the most of what you have. And you are a selfish cow. I know, everyone thinks so. Bea's throat clogged with tears. Ryan was staring at her again, but maybe now he had cause to stare. She was making a spectacle of herself, but Bea didn't have the energy or the will to control her emotions. Losing the heel of one of her Jimmy Choos wasn't a catastrophe in itself, but it felt like it on top of everything else she'd endured that day. Then, when she tried to be a good Samaritan, to show this man the compassion she would have wanted Declan to experience, he bloody well threw it back in her face. Why didn't you let me buy you a coffee this morning? She wailed. Because I don't drink caffeine, Ryan spoke softly and lilt his voice. Big flakes of snow that reminded Bea of ones she had cut from paper in school rested and then melted on her nose and eyelashes. They felt like tears. Maybe they were. Bea buried her face in her scarf, wishing that she could curl up and go to sleep right there, let the snow bury her. Ryan coughed. I don't want to seem inhospitable, but you're sitting on my bed and it's getting late. Maybe you should go home and sleep it off. Her mother would be appalled. She was slumped on a homeless man's bedding at 11:30 at night, on the street at King's Cross. Bea was appalled. She scrambled to her feet, the snow falling thick and fast. I'll put something over the cardboard, Sal. Make it waterproof, Ryan said to the old woman. It was impossible negotiating the snow with one heel missing, but Bea could not bear the feeling of ice on the sole of her foot. She headed for Denny's because that had been in her mind when she got off the train, to buy a strong coffee. But when she was at the counter, Bea had an idea. Hot chocolate. A hot chocolate would warm Ryan and Sal up and make amends for her bad manners. Hot chocolate didn't have caffeine, and then she would go home to bed. When Bea returned, balancing 2 large hot chocolates, Brian was securing thick bin liners over the cardboard shelter. Triumphant in her generosity, Bea held up her offering. I got you both a... Ouch! The lid slipped off one of the cups, scalding her hand, and Bea lost her grip. Almost in slow motion, she watched both cups tumble through the air. The brown liquid made an arc before landing on Ryan's sleeping bag. Jesus Christ, he whipped up his bedding, but it had already absorbed the hot, sticky drink.
Oh dear, that's a lovely reading. Thank you. Your character of Bea Stevens is such a complex character, and you managed to show us the very different sides of her personality so well, very effectively, but also very sensitively. How difficult was it for you to write the character of Bea and to get that balance right?
When I was writing Bea, I never, I'm sorry. My screen mixed around there. I'm so sorry. When I was writing Bea, when I first started writing her, I had to get to know the character. And I never set out to write her as a young woman on the autistic spectrum. But as I started getting into her character, I realized that that might well be the case. So I did some reading. And it just so happened, as soon as I started to read about the characteristics of some young women on the autistic spectrum, I actually came across quite a number of them could be obsessed with something. For example, fashion was given as an example. And I thought, well, they're describing my Bea. So everything I read felt like they were describing her. And I hadn't really got very far into the story then. I'd only written about 2 or 3 chapters. So I went back and did a little bit more rewrite on it. But I based the character on my research of young women on the autistic spectrum. Now, I never point out that she is, because Bea doesn't know, she's undiagnosed. And that's quite typical of young women. In doing my research, talking to psychologists and listening to people who have been diagnosed, women on the autistic spectrum, it transpired that for young women we're so good when we're young at trying to fit in and modeling ourselves on others' behavior that it would go undiagnosed in young women because they worked even harder to mimic and model themselves on those around them. And therefore it often goes undiagnosed. So when I was writing Bea, I was trying to come at it from how she would be feeling, to get under her skin. And with all my protagonists, I think, because they tend to be people who are on the edges of society and may feel like outsiders, they're people who can be misunderstood. So I love all my protagonists and I write them with compassion. So I never think I have to try to make them be liked because I love them. So why wouldn't my reader? And something makes me sad when people don't say they don't like a character, because I think, no, you just don't understand them. So I think that answers the question.
And you write so empathetically about your characters because you have that understanding of them, I think. And what I love about your characters very much is that you present a character to us on one level, and as a reader you come to them and think you know what you're going to get, and then as you read more into the story and the character is just revealed to you in more interesting ways, different ways, and you learn so much more about them as you go through that journey, and you're very good about taking us on that journey with your characters, and it's a wonderful part of your writing, and I really enjoy that very much. You touched on it a little bit in your answer there actually, but in your first book, The Borrowed Boy, and also in this book, you do write about characters who stand on the edge of society or have in some ways been left behind by society. Why do you feel so compelled to write about those particular characters? Why do you find them so compelling?
Yeah. Well, I've had a very long career in health and social care, and in probably the last 15 years working as a management consultant, I've spent a lot of time with people who are dealing with lots of adversity in life and perhaps feel on the outskirts of life, hearing their stories, because my job has been to give voice to those people whose voices aren't always heard. And so I hear their stories. And when I'm writing my non-fiction, government reports, safeguarding adult reviews, domestic homicide reviews, I try and, after listening to that person's story, put back to give voice to them. So as I'm moving on in my life, and I'm getting to the point where I'm semi-retiring and I'm doing what I love, writing, those voices are still clamoring to be heard. They won't leave me. But rather than writing the rather sad safeguarding adult reviews and domestic homicide reviews, which end, quite tragically, in writing my stories, I can write my protagonists a happy ending. So
Oh,
they're still in my head, they'll be in my stories.
oh, and that obviously is where the compassion comes from and the empathy comes from. It's informed by everything you've done in your working life up to this point. And
Absolutely, that has been my life work, really, is to listen to people and to try and reflect back so that others can see and feel and hear their
yes,
experience has been my.
it works completely. What sort of research did you have to do for Just Bea? And do you enjoy that part of the process, or is it something you'd rather just plunge straight into the storytelling? They're two very different sides of the process of writing, and I wonder how easy you find it to marry those two things together.
It's a really interesting question. And different research at different times and in different ways. So I told you a little bit about looking at women who'd be on the autistic spectrum and how that informed the story. That was very early on. I had plotted my story, and I knew I wanted it to be in Harrods. And the reason I wanted it in Harrods, I'm saying Harrods, it's Hartley's, but you would have noticed it's very much based on Harrods. It's very much. And I wanted to write about this department store because a good friend of mine had been a buyer for Harrods for many years and did some very interesting talks about her experience, behind the scenes. So she very kindly took me on a tour and gave me a lot of information, behind the scenes information about Harrods, which I then put into the story for Hartley's. So that research was based on Harrods, and it was from my friend and my visit, but also there's a Facebook group of people who work at Harrods. There's lots of publications that I've read. So I did a fair bit on Harrods because I wanted it to feel authentic, this department store, and because it fascinated me. But then the interesting bit of research that crept in another way, when I went on this research visit to Harrods in Knightsbridge with my friend, I said, well, I haven't worked out where Bea lives yet. So can we just have a look? I'll look at the tube line and work out where would be an easy commute. And I said, King's Cross, very direct, a few stops along that line. So we went to King's Cross. Now, in my work, I've passed through King's Cross many, many times over the years, and I thought I knew it. I've even worked in a road near King's Cross, but I hadn't really discovered it and hadn't noticed just how much transformation it had gone through. So on this lovely summer's day, when we were looking around King's Cross, we discovered Granary Square with the AstroTurf that I talk about, and and the art installations there. And we walked along the canal, the Regent's Canal. And it wasn't winter as it is in Just Bea, it was summertime. But as we walked along, I was just enchanted by the beautiful houseboats, the wildlife on the water. And we came across a barge, which wasn't Fandangle Foods, it was a bookshop. And this bookshop was where I got some of the ideas for Fandangle Foods. Just so happened that a band very much like the Potato Heads was playing on the towpath alongside the bookshop at that time. And we went inside and I noticed there was a log burner and I took photographs, and that very much informed Fandangle's food barge. And so all of that research ended up going into the story, even though I didn't know I was going to write about canal life. I just knew that Bea lived in King's Cross. And then when I was writing the story, when she stepped out of her flat, what did she see? Well, she saw what I saw when I was there, and then that part of the story told itself.
That's wonderful. It was literally a happy accident then. If you take, it's a bit like the sliding doors moment. If you'd gone left instead of going right, you wouldn't have discovered all of that wonderful area that then featured so prominently in the story.
There is another bit of research which I just wanted to share with you, and that was about homeless people. And that was because I really wanted to write about somebody who was homeless, because I had been walking along London Bridge one day on a way in to do a piece of work, and I saw a man, a youngish man, huddled up there. And when I looked into his face, his Mediterranean face, and I thought I could imagine him in all my travels. He could have been a tour guide, he could have been a gondola, and he could have, I imagined him in all the different lives he might have, other than a homeless man sitting on the pavement. And I just felt some compassion and some connection. And then I walked further along London Bridge, and I saw a woman a little bit older than me ask an older gentleman, would he like a cup of tea or coffee? And she went off to get it for him. Well, I'd always wanted to do that, and I'd always been nervous of talking to somebody who's homeless. I think lots of people are. You think, oh, should you give them money? How will they feel if you get them a drink? And what's the right thing? And we forget these are just people, and we get nervous about how to respond to them. So I went running after this woman. I literally ran after her to catch up with her. And I said to her breathlessly, can I talk to you? And she looked at me very strange, because in London Bridge and during the commuting time, people don't go up to strangers. Well, she did.
Nobody ever talks to one another.
And I said to her, I saw what you did, and I've always wanted to do that. And I just wanted to know what your reactions have been. And she said, nobody has ever been unhappy with me asking them, and sometimes I just chat, sometimes I give a tea or coffee. And she said, do it. So then I did. I started doing that. And as I was doing that, and I got people's tea and coffee, I'd sit down and talk to them. Some of them, not all of them. I remember one man, I said, did you want anything? And he talked to me, and I said, now, can I get you anything? He said, you've given me what I really needed. You've talked to me. And that's just nothing to give. That's so easy to give. So that bit of research, when I talk about the people, the homeless people, some of them are based on characteristics of people that I've met on the street as well. So I will continue to do that, and I urge anybody else to as well.
Yeah, it's so important, because we can just be so busy in our own lives that we sometimes just do not notice the people around us, do we? And we have to be aware of our surroundings a bit more. I think it's important.
I think
and there's such wonderful things in the book.
And that's one of the things I was thinking, is that we kind of have these sort of like on the front, the globe, we kind of live in our world, and there's all this world going on out here. Yeah. All the homeless people around us, and in The Borrowed Boy was about hidden communities too, and we don't see them, and we make assumptions, and we all live in our own little bubbles. When bubbles had a different
name, it's important.
Virus.
Yes, different sorts of bubbles. But And those happy accidents that came from the walk along the canal, for me, some of those scenes are the most wonderful scenes in the book. They're full of energy and vibrancy and colour, and I love those scenes. They were brilliant. So thank you for sharing that. It's interesting to learn the process of how the book built layer by layer as you were creating it. What do you enjoy most about the writing process?
You know, I love every part of it. I know some writers say they don't like the editing, they don't like the marketing. I can honestly say, hand on heart, I love every bit, from the idea, the birth of the idea, right through to editing and marketing and all of it. But the bit I really enjoy is when you are in the zone, when you get into your writing and you're so absorbed in it that you lose all sense of time, and you just go inward. Because it's like, I do a lot of meditating, and it's like meditation, because the outside world disappears and you're just there in the story. I think it's the reader gets absorbed in a story. As a reader you do. I think we kind of mirror it as a writer, you know, how it's received and how we give it. We just go into this separate world, don't we?
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. When you're in that process and you're lost in time and you're just completely consumed by what you're working on, it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling, and hours will just fly by. And you don't think to stop for a drink or something to eat. You're just not even aware of any hunger or thirst, because you're so concentrated on what you're working on. And it's a wonderful time when that happens. It doesn't happen every time you sit down to write, sadly, but when it does, it's wonderful, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's wonderful.
You've got a very gentle, I'm not going to give any plot details away, I wouldn't do that, but you've got a very gentle love story at the heart of Just Bea, and actually there was a gentle love story at the heart of The Borrowed Boy as well. And I just wondered if that's going to be a recurring theme in your novels, and also why you're drawn to writing slightly off-kilter love stories, not the run-of-the-mill sort that we're used to seeing in women's fiction.
No. Well, I think romance is always going to come in my stories, because I am a romantic soul at heart. I always have been. And I think romance is part of our everyday experience anyway. If my romances are off kilter, it's probably because my characters, my protagonists, are out of the ordinary. But everybody from every walk of life, whatever age, we all experience love. So, and I love writing about love. It's a good emotion.
We need more positive emotions, especially in the world we're living in at the moment. So it's definitely a good thing. Can you share with us a few insights into your sort of day as a writer? I don't know if there is a typical day for you, whether they're different depending on what your priorities are at any one time, but give us a little bit of a taste of what it's like to be Deborah Klée, the author.
I'm always very disciplined with myself. Whatever, people that know me will know this. Whatever I do, I'm always quite disciplined about how I manage my time. So when I write, I have, my routines will change, but at the moment my routine is that I like to get up and be at my desk by 7:30 in the morning to start writing, my creative writing. Before I write, I usually spend about 10 minutes meditating, just to clear my head, so that I get into the zone quicker. And it just sets me up for the day. And then I will write for an hour and a half to 2 hours. I don't write longer than that. An hour and a half, even if I'm mid flow, I try and stop myself at that point. I've got to, in the afternoon, later in the afternoon, is when I do other activities which are about connecting with readers and other creatives, which will be things like writing my blog, my newsletter, recording my YouTube channel, Castaway Books. So there's lots and lots of other things we do as writers, and I try and keep that at the moment to the afternoon, because if I didn't do my creative writing first thing, it would be nagging me all day long. I'd feel antsy until I had got my fix. And I'm really,
I know that feeling.
I think all writers are like that. And the other thing is because, especially during this lockdown period, when there's little other distraction, it'd be very easy to spend all day writing or doing writerly connected things, you know, marketing, writing. So I've got another rule I've given myself, is to spend no more than 4 hours on it each day. So 2 hours writing in the morning, 2 hours in other activities later in the day. And then that leaves time to live, you know, to spend time with family, to do other activities. I love craft work. At the moment, I'm working on some modeling clay, making sort of a shop scene, and I do make my Tilda dolls and all sorts of things. Walking, like my yoga, and I do more meditation. So I do other things for the rest of the day. Otherwise, all day could easily be eaten up with writing and writerly things.
It's important. It's important to get that balance right, isn't it? Because I think writers can very easily get sucked into just doing more and more work, particularly at the moment when our outside world is restricted. And I think there's a risk then that we just become so focused on what we're doing that we go into burnout. So I think it's very important to pace yourself, isn't it? And that's true in any walk of life, of course. But I think because we're so screen based as well, it's particularly important that you have that kind of time away from a screen of any kind and just connect with real people. So
absolutely. Well, at the moment, you know, I know Julia Cameron talks about art estates, which is when I did all those lovely discoveries on Regent's Canal, was all that stimulation, it all then comes out in the writing. But at the moment, we're kind of starved of that. So if you're not doing other things like other activities, for me, craft work, but any other activity, you're getting no other stimulation, and you need to keep having exposed to different situations and things to get more ideas, because we're not going to exhibitions.
Refill the creative well, I think, is how she describes it, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Well done. Yeah, creative, feeding the creative well.
Yeah. You touched on it a little while ago. You just mentioned your newsletter there. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your newsletter and what you share with your readers through that?
Yes, we're delighted to. My newsletter, I always give a bit of information about behind the scenes in my books. So we were talking about taking photographs, for example, on the in the bookshop on the canal, and so I'll share with my readers who subscribe to my mailing list photographs of behind the scenes, you know, that have influenced, and you know, I've drawn the story from. So I share those. And I sent out a free mini sequel to The Borrowed Boy, which was a little bit that had to be cut from it because my editor quite rightly said it wasn't the main storyline, but it was a part of the story I loved so much, which is Higgins' part of the story, that I put it into a separate story, Higgins' story, which I put as a freebie for people that sign up. And also at the end, when we do our little prize draw, everybody who is signed up to my mailing list automatically went in for that. So I keep readers updated with what's happening, behind the scenes information, and freebies that I can offer at different times. So if you haven't signed up, please do so. And above all, it means that we can communicate. Now, I share my author email address with you in my email letters. And so it means that we can communicate. You could tell me what you like, and yeah, it gives a two-way relationship, which is so important to us as writers.
Oh, yeah, that's lovely. And I think we're going to have some links up, aren't we, to your website and to your blog, and to all of the key links are going to be displayed on the screen so that people can find out more about you and more about your books, and they can click on all of those links. Will there be some bonus material that's linked to Just Bea in due course?
Possibly. I'm thinking about whether I'm going to write more stories with the characters from Just Bea. So we'll see whether it's going to be extra stories or if it's going to go into another book. Haven't decided yet.
Oh, lovely dilemma to have.
If you sign up for my email, for my newsletter, I'll keep you abreast of that.
You'll find out the answer to that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure there'll be plenty of good stuff there. So please do, everybody, sign up. It's a wonderful way to get to know a writer and to find out more about the writer that you wouldn't see otherwise. So it's a lovely thing to be able to do. So please sign up. Can you just share a few tips with us, if you're able to, for any aspiring writers who might be watching this? What you would give them as a key advice, really?
I think that don't look at it about, oh, I could never write a book, because none of us thought that at the beginning. It's like saying run a marathon before you've even tried building up to 1K. You know, take things in little steps. We're all we're all on this writer's journey together. We're all at different stages, but we're all learning and we're all supporting and helping each other. I started off by writing short stories. And even then, I remember being terrified of sharing my work with anybody, but I joined a little creative writing group in the village I lived in at that time. And that group encouraged me and gave me confidence. And more recently, I suppose it's a good few years ago now, I joined the Frinton Writers Group, of which Ellie here, Holmes, is a
Hey, the
member.
Frinton Writers Group. Big shout out to the Frinton Writers Group.
Frinton Writers, wonderful, all of them very talented writers. We're all novel writers. We critique each other's work, we support each other, and I don't know whether I would have even got published if it hadn't been for the support of these tremendous friends and talented writers. So yes, find people who are on the same journey as you and who can support your work, and accept its small steps. I imagine that, going up this mountain, I imagine, and we take little tiny steps, sometimes one back, sometimes two forward, but it's only when you look down, you think, gosh, how far have I come? And
That's so true of so many things in life, not just of being a writer. But,
and we'll heave up somebody who's stumbling, or when somebody resting, and we'll look to somebody up there, and we're all on this mountain path together.
what I love about writers generally is that we are very, very supportive of one another. You find that it's hard to find that in other professions, I think, but writers are very generous with their time. They're very generous with their advice, and people do need to connect with other writers, even if it's just digitally. And at the moment we can't do anything face to face, but to be able to connect with other writers and just learn from them. And I think something else you said that was key is we never stop learning. It doesn't matter what stage of the journey we're on, whether you're multi-published or whether you're just sitting at a keyboard or picking up a pen for the first time, you never stop that learning process as you go along, do you?
No, that's right. Absolutely. I've been so impressed by the writing community on social media, particularly Twitter and Facebook. And I was somebody who never engaged with social media before March last year. And I have just been quite overwhelmed by the support from other writers. So yes, that's another place to get your support too.
Definitely. And you're going to have some links to your social media underneath this as well, so that people can click on there, connect with you on Twitter and see what you're doing on there, because it's a great way to reach out to writers and get to know people. So I think you've got a prize draw to do for us, have you?
I have, yes, I have. In my pretty little bowl.
Oh, that is very pretty.
Okay. Okay, and the winner, who's going to be sent a signed paperback copy of Just Bea, is Sue Chottipong.
Oh, congratulations, Sue. You're in for a treat. It's a lovely, lovely book. I've had the privilege of reading it already, and it's a wonderful, wonderful read. I think all that's left for me to say now is a huge thank you to Deborah for sharing Just Bea with us today and giving us such an interesting insight into your world. It's been fabulous. I want to wish you well for the future, and particularly for the launch of Just Bea. I hope it's a fabulous success for you. I think there'll be some buy links along the bottom of this, so people can click on those. They can go and have a read about the book. They can purchase the book. I'd urge everybody to read Just Bea. It's a funny, uplifting, heartwarming tale, and we could all do with a little bit of that in our lives right now, couldn't we? So please take a look at the link below. And sorry, Deborah, do you want to say something?
Yeah, one other thing is my blog tour is taking place all this week. So if you haven't found it already, to catch up, and you're on my Facebook page now, so you'll see on there all the details for the blog tour. So you can also join in there too.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. So that's another way to learn some bit more about Just Bea and more excerpts from it, isn't it?
And a big thank you to the book bloggers who've taken part in my blog tour this week.
Yes, such an important resource for all writers. So yes, the book bloggers, we couldn't manage without them, could we?
Absolutely.
Thanks again, Deborah. Thanks everyone for joining us. That was brilliant. Thank you.
And very great. Thank you for a great interview, Ellie, and for hosting. It's wonderful.
Oh, happy to do so.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.